Monica Jayne. Thank you so
Hi.
much for taking the time to come on, connect with me, and do this interview with me.
You bet. I love spending time with you. It's always quality.
Yep, I love connecting with you as well. And so could you give just a short introduction of yourself for the people who'll be watching this interview? Share with us just who you are and what it is that you do, and however you like to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, I'm a shapeshifter by nature, so I like to, my introduction changes depending on where I am and who I'm with and what the context is, all while being true to myself, not shapeshifting in people-pleasing mode, but rather, just really embracing the context of who and where I am. And so I go by Monica Jayne, all 4 syllables. It's a 2-namer. And I like to call myself a trailblazer of unabashed badassery. And what that means is I'm a conscious rebel that's non-conforming to the systemic societal norms and pressures that we are under consistently to conform to. So I'm a nonconformist. I'm a gender nonconformist. So I am genderqueer and use they, them, or she, her pronouns. And I like to just really understand people and from where they're coming and help them come from their inside outward instead of all of the external influences telling them who and how to be and, expressing as what I call a zombie robot. So I help conscious, authentic adults who have probably been self-addicted to self-development and, just working on themselves and becoming the best person they can be. And they, most of the time when we end up working together, they feel stuck in some way because they've done all the things, they've read all the books, they've been to the workshops, but they're not able to consistently live out all of this communication and relationship stuff and all the things that they've learned. And I have my theories on why, and maybe we'll get into that. But basically, I help people be unabashedly themselves. And if you don't know, anyone who's listening, unabashed means unashamed, because I come from being an extremely shamed and repressed human that was a zombie robot, being all the things that I thought I should be, and coming into my own truth and authenticity in my early 30s. And so I am here to guide and be a lamplighter and a compass for others to do the same.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you shared, unabashed badassery. Mm-hmm. That is an awesome mouthful. I love it.
Thank you. I love that you're saying that. And I actually, I have this thing where it's a really cool, catchy word or term. I guess it's 2 words. And it can get lost on people as a catchy term. And there's a lot of significance and gravitas to the term. So unabashed means unashamed. And badassery comes from the fact that to be yourself is an act of bravery in the world that we have all been born into in the context of, 4 to 6 generations before and after us right now. And it's unfortunate that it is seen as so brave and courageous and badass to be yourself, to listen to you and to not conform. But that's where we're at. And so the badassery is, it's not about just being different for the sake of being different, but rather being uniquely authentic to your truth, whether it's how you wear your hair, what clothes you put on, what gender you decide you are, what car you drive, what career you pursue, who you marry, all aspects of life. So unabashed is freeing yourself from the bondage of the shame, repression, and oppression of society, culture, religion, and family telling us who and how to be and telling us we won't belong, and what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. I know you work a lot in the dualities and polarity realm, so maybe you'll have some things to say about that. So thanks for noticing the cool term, and the gravitas and reverence and significance of it is very, very thick. And I hope that people really feel that once they get to know what I mean by unabashed badassery.
Yeah, thanks for dialing that in. I think that's important too, because I think that's why it stood out to me, because I felt the gravitas of it. And yes, it's a cool term. It's a fun term to say, but because I've gotten to know you to a certain degree, I feel that in you. I feel that unashamed badass, that you're, you know, that you embody and that you support other people in embodying.
Thank
And
you.
so that's a good lesson for me too. Those are still things for me to work on. Look at, where do I hold back because I'm not being unashamed, right? Those are still questions and things that I look at for myself. And I appreciate it when I see folks like you really, like, that is the focus, that's the intention. And you're also just being your authentic self within that, even when sometimes it's challenging or sometimes it's just flowing. That's the journey, is like, I'm going to be me. Some people might like it, some people might not.
Yeah, totally.
It also that's not even the point. It doesn't even matter.
Right. It's non-performative. That's the other part. It's non-performative. It's not for anyone other than my own eros, my own internal compass that tells me what lights me up and makes my life worth living, what's worth saying yes to and worth saying no to. And
so you said this a little bit, but I'd love to ask, is there a succinct way you can share what it means to you to fully be yourself?
You said succinct, so I'm up for the challenge. Honestly, it's noticing whose voice is talking inside of you, inside of myself. Whose voice is talking inside of me? Is that my voice? Or is it the voice of society, culture, religion, family, specific figures in each of those areas, realms, or arenas, a third grader making fun of me on the playground, or my own, memory from a long time ago, or my own voice? And in considering if it is someone else's voice, someone else's belief, someone else's shaming, guilting, judging, ridiculing, repressing of me, I get to choose whether or not I want to subscribe to that. And in those moments, that reconciliation of whose voice is this? And do I truly, authentically believe that? And am I going to allow that to dictate who and how I show up as right now? That's the process of reconciliation into your own unabashed badassery.
And then what are the specific practices that you've done to help you be able to distinguish, discern, and experience what is your true authentic inner voice and what is the other noise?
It's interesting to be asked like what practices, because honestly, I feel like throughout my life as a self-development junkie, myself trying to become all of who I can be, and all the phrases that are in self-development, be your true self. So I wouldn't say it's like methodical practices. I've done a bunch of stuff. Part of that was my mom dying and talks that I had with her on her deathbed about sexuality, where I got to be set free by her 3 days before she died in my sexuality, where I had been brought up Catholic And then my parents kind of went through a few Christian rejuvenations, and were like Seventh-day Adventists for a minute in my 20s, and then Calvary Chapel and different, Christian doctrines. And so I was like heavily steeped in that, the dogma around sexuality from that. And so there's really like significant moments in my life rather than processes. So to solidify an example, my mom was on her deathbed. They said she had 60 to 90 days, but within 3, she was out of it. She was starting to not, her motor functions and functions were starting to go away. And so she actually passed in 8 days of those 60 to 90 that they gave her. And we immediately, in those first 3 days, we were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? This is happening way too fast. And so we started asking questions, the deathbed questions, like, how did you know dad was the one? What does it take to be a good mother, wife? Is there any advice you'd want to leave the world? Questions like that. And I realized that I had grown up with my mom covering my eyes and my ears when romance was happening on the television. And so I would start to get that arousal, that eros, that life force that tells me what's a yes and what's a no to me. And in this context, it's like a sexual example. And so I would start to get that arousal, which is the unabashed badassery. That is the unabashed piece that we are all born into, and it's our birthright. And it is stripped, shamed, repressed, and oppressed out of us by multiple influences externally. And in this case, it was religion and family. And so she would cover my eyes and ears, and when it was safe, let me back up. And if we would get compliments out in public, or even like unsolicited cat calls, she would get a very stoic, not connected to life force energy response. And she would say, don't give them what they want, don't react. And so these are a couple of examples of how I learned to disconnect and disembody from my unabashed badassery, from my eros, my compass. Turn on an arousal. There's a lot of things here. You asked me a very simple question. It's multi-layered. Turn on an arousal is, I've found out from being not connected to it at all and creating a life for myself that was totally unfulfilling. I had a 6-figure executive level job income, climbed up the corporate ladder as the only female. I was female identified at the time, the only female in a all male company, climbed all the way to the top, operations manager, 6-figure exec, had a 3-bedroom, 3-car garage house, the new car, the 5-year relationship headed toward marriage. All the boxes were checked of the shoulds of how to be happy and fulfilled in life. And I wasn't. And I was like, why am I so fucking unhappy? You might have to bleep that out. That's the sentiment I had. And it was because I was using external influences as my compass of what was a yes and what was a no for me. So I checked all the boxes and was unfulfilled. So now my mom's on her deathbed, and I didn't know if I ever had an orgasm before. I told you, we're going all over the place. And I had 14 years of fooling around, including penetrative sex for some of those years. And so I asked her, I told her, I have something to ask. You might not want to talk about it. I don't want to, what's that called? Ruin your dignity in your final hours. And she's like, what is it? And I asked her, I just want to round back. You asked me what things have I done to be able to tap into unabashed badassery? And I'm saying they weren't processes, they were events in life, significant moments in life. And the why am I so effing unhappy was one of them. And then with my mom on her deathbed, have you ever had an orgasm, Mom? And her looking around us never having spoken about sex before. And I'm 28 and she's 58. And
Wow.
she goes, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean you don't know? And she said, well, and we had a conversation, our first and only, about sex, and she died 3 days later. And at the end of that conversation, so here's significant moment number 2, she said, if I had it to do over again, I'd be more open and adventurous sexually. And so what I learned from that was to allow myself to be more open and adventurous sexually. So I pursued adult sex education for adults. Like, why is my body not working? Am I broken? I'm anorgasmic. What's wrong with me? And over the course of 4 years, I was introduced to my birthright, which is, you have this thing inside of you that goes, about a sunset, about a bite of food that you have, about a dress or an outfit you see in the store, and about sex.
Yeah.
And it is called your turn on, it's called your arousal. And guess what? When you listen to that, that is the compass that lights the path to that which makes life worth living, that which is a yes for you, uniquely wired as you. No one else could like that outfit, but it just jazzes and juices you up. That's for you, not the thing that's on the front of the magazines or all the actresses are wearing, or that Cosmo says is the hottest trend for spring, 1998, that thing. And so I learned that by being disconnected from my turn on and arousal, there was no chance in hell I would ever be an unabashed badass. The only way that one can do it is to be connected to their truth, which has no shame. There's no room or space for shame. And so what you said when you were talking about yourself a little bit ago, I don't remember exactly what came up for me was internalized shame. So everyone is shamed for this energy. Like, even if it's not sexual, my friend just the other day was saying that she loves like classic cars. One, she's a woman. Women don't like cars. That's a, prescription of society, culture, or maybe family. 2, she's getting aroused. The eros is coming out, the life force is coming out. And she's just like, oh my gosh, that car, and just like getting all animated. And people got uncomfortable around her. And they were like, oh, you're getting a little weird about the cars. And that's what people are conditioned to do. They have internalized shame about that, the power of turn on, the power of arousal. And it is so powerful. And that's why on Facebook and Instagram, and as per the government, like, we cannot be like sexual beings, because if we were, we would all be unabashed badasses, and we wouldn't conform to all that society, culture, religion, and family tells us we need to be. And the world would not look the way that it does today. And so each of us as individuals who get in touch with this and become unabashed badasses through connection to the authority of self and exercise. I use these funny words like resurrect. I resurrected my turn on and arousal because I grew up Catholic. It's a play on words. And then exercise the demons, like exercise all the shame and repression out of me. So these are all like significant events throughout life, and being around people who gave themselves permission to be sensual, sexual, erotically awake beings is what brought me into being able to be that myself.
I love that. I love what you just shared. First of all, I want to say what an honor it is that you're taking the time to share this very personal story with me. So I'm honored that you're taking the time out of your day to do this interview and to share such a personal story and experience with me and with whoever is watching. That's very powerful. And gosh, there's multiple directions I could go, right? There's multiple tangents to go on that.
Follow your turn on. Which one arouses you the most?
Hey, I love that question. You know, what was coming up for me was like even the frustration around sort of, I don't even know what you'd call it, like the messages, like you say, there's a societal message to not be a sexual being, to not follow that turn on. But then at the same time, there's a whole societal message from the media to, hey, get turned on. Sex sells. Sex sells. Right? So
it's allowed to be outside of you.
When you watch a fight, there's the ring girl in the bikini. There's the airbrushed, perfected photos of half naked women on the magazines, or half naked men on the magazines, or whatever. We could do endless examples of it, right? Or pornography and the way it's experienced so unhealthfully right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, here, pay attention to sex because sex sells, but don't show it. Or like, I don't even know how to say it. It's like you get two messages at the same time, which creates an insanely unhealthy and repressed dynamic.
And it's all by design. It's all by design. Like that sexuality can externally, it can be out here. But the moment that it's in your body, that's shameful, and you need to hide it, and you need to shut that down. Like, don't be a pervert. Don't be, a whore or a slut or whatever negative words there are for all of the different genders. And it's like, it is very confusing, like very confusing. Like you said, mixed messages. If we can gawk at a beautiful airbrushed human on a billboard, but then look down on the street next to the pool side and a woman has the same outfit on, we like a very skinny, tiny bathing suit or something, and we say that person's a whore, but then we like pedestalize this thing up on the billboard. It is very, very confusing.
Yeah, very confusing, very not okay, in my opinion. And yeah, and there's a deep disrespect that happens, I think, within that whole dynamic for the individual and for the individuals being objectified.
I love how you're bringing up that it's confusing, because it's unconsciously confusing for most people. And so that's one of the missions I have, is to like destigmatize talking about your confusion about sex and sexuality. Like, give you safe spaces to open up and explore, absent of prescriptive ways of being, because then we had our safe space to learn about sex education in high school. And I mean, I grew up in the United States of America in a Mormon area as a Catholic. So I have my limited experience of what sex education was there. And basically it's, don't have it. And if you do, you're going to get pregnant and you're going to get a disease. And this disgusting picture of, painfulness is what you're going to end up with. And I just use the word disgusting, which stigmatizes STIs and STDs. They're not disgusting. They're just a function of being a human. But because of my conditioning, I want to apologize to anyone who heard me say that just then. That was my conditioning coming out from being in high school and calling it disgusting. And it's like, oh, geez, like deprogram. No shame there. If you have an STI or an STD, just very important that you get sex positive education on how to work with and deal with that. But the point there was that the safe space to like learn about sex, a lot of us didn't have it. And if we did, it was don't do it. And if you do, you're going to have this tragic outcome and deal with, open wounds between your legs for the rest of your life. Amen. go on about your day.
Yeah, and I could say, I grew up in a very suppressive Christian sexual environment as well. So everything you're saying is also hitting home for me as well. The type of approach and attitude towards it that created a very confusing dynamic for me from a very young age, where I've always been someone who's had a very intense amount of sexual energy running through my body that I did not know how to channel from a young age. I just did not know what to do with it.
Well, how would you? Like, there's no rites of passage, no rituals and education that this is a good thing. And here's how you can, live fulfilled with that energy.
Right. Yeah, I think exactly. And having adults around that are living by example, I think makes the biggest difference to young people in that regard. Because
funny thing is, I've heard from clients that they had parents that were too open sexually. And so there's the whole topic of, consensual sex education, and parents will flip to the other side of the spectrum because they didn't get any education at all. And then they're being like too much, too fast, too revealing, and shutting down their children from, traumatizing them with like too much, too fast, too soon information. So yeah, it's like a very delicate space that I work in, adult sex education for fulfillment. And I don't, my work with people isn't sex centric. So another like to turn to a different aspect of this, another way that someone can channel their sexual energy is through their self-expression, through the way that they dress, the things that they create, the conversations they have, the stuff that they're involved in life, the job that they choose. All of these things are ways to like channel that creative, powerful self-expression and sexual energy. But when we are following, like I did, the corporate America path, which by the way, for some people is a turn on, is arousing and is fulfilling. So by no means am I shaming anyone who is into like corporate America turns them on, but for me it wasn't. And so I didn't get that creative fulfillment and expression through my career path and college choices from age 17 until I think I was 32 or 33 when I finally quit that and left and took off and became a digital nomad and had a like completely non-societal norm life, living out of a carry-on backpack, traveling across 6 continents. And I think I'm up to like 44 or 47 countries now.
Wow.
Just being myself.
Yeah.
However, the unconscious confusion and repression and like trying to corral and contain that sexual energy is what leads people to violence of different kinds, including sexual violence, passive aggression, depression, anxiety, suicide, just not even being passively aggressive, just being aggressive and taking stuff out on their family, their friends, their coworkers. So it's an epidemic, this unconscious confusion, repression of sexual energy, of being connected to your eros, your unabashed badassery, to know what's actually a yes for you and what's a no, what's life-giving and what's life-taking. Because most people are making life-taking choices, contracting, tense, stressful, stress-inducing choices most days, most of the time.
Contract, release. Go back to contract, release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that release can come out in sex, but it can also come out in all those other ways that we just listed. Passive aggression, violence, aggression, depression, anxiety, suicide, self-hatred, self-loathing.
Yeah.
I've seen all of these things heal through getting in touch with that eros. And that doesn't mean that every client I work with, like sex is the answer. It doesn't have to be like through just the act of sex or self-pleasure. It's through their self-expression. They start loving themselves. Instead of self-loathing, they're self-loving. Instead of self-hatred, they're in self-acceptance. And then they are fulfilling themselves. So part of the reason why we've been taught to separate from our own replenishment, our own, it depends on which, if you're doing like Taoist or tantric wisdom, they'll say, you only have a certain amount or something of this sexual energy or the seed or whatever. But I believe it's a never ending magical fountain within us. And if we are programmed to be looking outside of ourselves for happiness and fulfillment, that's like a never ending battle. Like it depletes. But once people are in touch with their own eros, their own never ending fountain tank of life force energy, through resurrecting their connection to turn on. And some people come and they have fulfilling sex lives. It's not about that. It's about them not being people pleasers at work, getting stepped on. It's about them dating the same person over and over and repeating familial patterns. So once people get in alignment with their own tank and they're fulfilled by themselves, self-loathing turns into self-love, self-hatred turns into self-acceptance, people-pleasing turns into standing up for yourself and listening to yourself and putting your voice and your needs first with grace and love and discernment. And being an unabashed badass doesn't mean that you're an inconsiderate jerk. However, we've been taught to look at people who are fully in touch with themselves and call them selfish.
Yeah.
And call them self-centered and egotistical and all of these things, when really they're in right relationship with themselves and we're the ones who aren't. That I remember that. Ooh, I did a Facebook Live like 2 or 3 years ago. And it was 2 or 3 parts because the internet kept going out, and I have blonde hair in it if you want to Facebook stalk me. And it said, I've become the woman I used to hate. Because I would see these women full of themselves, which is a good thing I learned, and full of life, and just be like so radiant and magnetic and always get what they wanted and so happy. And I would just be so mad at them. I would call them prissy little bitches. And I found out, oh, they have what I didn't and now do, which is that connection to be full of myself, from myself, and not have to depend on anything outside of me for that validation, acceptance, and love.
Everything you're saying is really powerful. I'm feeling just replenished, just listening to you. And everything you're saying, I couldn't say it better myself. And it really resonates a lot. What's a beginning step that someone could take to go from self-loathing to self-love and acceptance?
So you asked for like steps and processes. And what's interesting is last March in an interview like this, someone asked me, how do you help people get what they want? And this framework fell out of my mouth. So I'm going to tell you the first step. And it's going to be set up with some theory first. So I've named society, culture, religion, and family. And I named them in that order on purpose, because if you look at the first letters of each word, SCRF, it's an acronym that when you put those letters together and sound it out, you could say scarf, SCRF. And the way I see it is SCARF prescribes to us all the shoulds and shouldn'ts, all the ways that you should be, the things you should do, the stuff you should believe, and all that you shouldn't be, do, or have, and everything that you should judge is wrong. And so as we're growing up, like, boys don't cry. We start putting this in our SCARF. We knit. Boys don't cry. Sit like a lady. Get good grades. Be pleasing to the teacher. Otherwise, you won't get, like, to get something out of the treasure box. Make sure you don't fall asleep in church. Be nice to your brothers and sisters. So some of them are helpful and useful, like eat dinner with your family every night. That is a prescription that I received from my family that I love. And I love eating at the table every single night with someone else there, and especially family and bonding. But the other things I got, like hold in your anger and sadness because your dad is the only one who gets to feel in this family. No, that doesn't serve me. However, I carried that into life and never felt my emotions. And while my mom was battling cancer, thank goodness for a close friend from high school. This was, 10, 11 years after high school. This was another turning point moment where I had a prescription that I was carrying, don't feel your feelings. And she's a soft-spoken, well, I don't know about soft-spoken, but she's not aggressive. And she asked me how I was doing. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. And like changed the subject and talked about something else. And we were sitting at the table and her arm swung out behind her around and went bam on the table so loud. And she goes, you need to stop. And I was like stunned because she doesn't do that, because her family prescription was don't be angry. Anger's not allowed, but she was being aggressive. And I was like, stop what? And she goes, you need to feel your feelings. Monica, Jayne, your mom is dying. Your dad's knee just blew out. You've run out of all of your money. You're putting everything on your credit cards. You can't make your car payment. You are not fine. You need to feel your feelings. So that was the turning point moment for that prescription. I know, right? That was the turning point moment for that prescription. So what I'm saying is we knit this scarf from society, culture, religion, and family our entire life. And then we have these moments of reconciliation where all of a sudden we realize this cozy, warm scarf that kept us safe and made us belong and be acceptable on the playground and acceptable to preacher at church and acceptable to family because we were conforming. One day as an adult, over like it could be multiple times, we realize, oh my gosh, this is a noose. This isn't a scarf. This is a noose. It's killing me. It's strangling the life out of me. It's making me make choices that aren't in alignment with my yes and no, my authenticity, my unabashed badassery. And so I have this theory that scarf is where we need to look. So you asked, how does someone get started? So step one of this framework that just birthed through my lips last March, about a year ago now, was to look back to move forward. So you look back on scarf, not just in your childhood. That's one of the biggest faults I find in self-development, the self-development industry. We blame everything on childhood. Shitty stuff has happened in my adulthood that has programmed me, and I have taken those prescriptions. Every relationship that I've had, I have new prescriptions from, good, bad, ugly, serve me, don't serve me, whatever. So look back to yesterday, all the way to before you were born, at these different influences and what they taught you, and look for the beliefs that you might even deny you subscribe to. Like perhaps one of them is be homophobic. Only heterosexuality is acceptable. And in this day and age, and most people listening to this video right now are probably like, I don't subscribe to that. Like we're over that. Like as a society, we're getting over that. However, when you go further into the steps of, it's actually called authentic evolution, and there's 7 steps. And when you go further into them, you find out, oh my gosh, I do think of that. Every time I look at somebody I'm attracted to, I go, thank God they're the opposite sex, because if they weren't, my family wouldn't love me. So maybe you don't subscribe to that belief in action, like you're not homophobic, but that belief is still affecting your trains of thought or your decisions or your self-validation or worth in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of gave you a bonus second step too. So the first is to look through SCARF and look for like the most potent 3. You'll find hundreds. You could do it for anything. You could do it about sexuality. You could do it about relationships. You could do it about career. You could do it about money. Or you can just look at SCARF in general and be like, what are the most debilitating, most disconnecting from me things that I was prescribed, that I am subscribing to in some way, shape, or form, whether it's as subtle as the example I gave or as blatant as, oh my gosh, I'm attracted to that same sex as me human. I can't be, my family will disown me. It's not worth it. I can't.
Sure, you might feel like, yeah, I'm cool with other people being gay, but I can't be gay.
Exactly. So
Something like
that's,
that, for an example, yeah.
yeah. So in one of the steps, you're looking at, on a scale of 0 to 3. 0, it never affects the way you treat yourself or the way you think. And then, it's like every now and then, sometimes, most of the time, all the time, or whatever 0 through 3 would be. And so it's really important to look at that, because so many of us are in denial. I'm still in denial. I still excavate these things all the time. Like one of them I'm working on right now is other people's joy is threatening to me. I'm not safe in other people's joy. And I think I learned that because anytime my dad was super boastful and joyful, it was because he worked a bunch of overtime, made a bunch of money, and went and spent it all on something else, which was actually a detriment to our family's goals and everything that we wanted. And so other people's joy is threatening to my survival and livelihood. I've become conscious of this from my own partner's joy and me trying to diminish or demean it when they're sharing it with me over the last year. Like, it doesn't work. It's a deal breaker for our relationship. And I didn't even know that I was carrying it. I didn't know that I was doing that to them. And they actually didn't either for about 6 months until they realized, like, wait a minute, you robbed me of my joy. And I was like, what do you mean? No, I don't. Why would I do that? And we're like 4 months later or 6 months later, after that 6-month mark of them telling me and me needing to reconcile with that is actually true. And it does not serve them. It doesn't serve me. And it certainly doesn't serve our relationship. So they can be sneaky little sneakers.
I think a lot of what you just shared is going to resonate with a lot of people who listen to this interview. And do a little time check here for us. So we got about 10 minutes left. And so you can correct me if I'm incorrect. You're also an Erotic Blueprint certified coach?
Yeah, I have a certification in the Erotic Blueprint coaching, and then in the accelerated evolution. Sometimes I get confused because my thing's called authentic evolution, and I'm like, did I say that right? So a certification in accelerated evolution as well, and then a certified yoga teacher, authentic relating facilitator, and then all kinds of nervous system and somatic experience. Absent certifications, but I weave somatic and nervous system regulation into all of my work, because quite frankly, we could talk up and down and sideways and round for 24 hours about all of this stuff. But until you are able to either on your own figure out where you are in your nervous system, are you in healthy fight or unhealthy fight? Like fight that you need because you need to stand up for yourself right now, or fight like my diminishing of my partner's joy because I feel threatened, and it's not an actual threat. It's a perceived threat that's not real. So I have a mentor that calls it appropriate and inappropriate. So what I'm saying is we could talk about all of this. And if I weren't someone who can work with you and your body, your somatics and your nervous system, and give you like breathing techniques and different movement techniques to regulate and ground your nervous system toward appropriate flight, appropriate fight, appropriate freeze, appropriate fawning, and all of this, none of this would matter because your body is where it all comes from. Your body is what has internalized all the shame, repression, danger, I'm unsafe. So that's a huge part. But to answer your question, yes, I'm a certified erotic blueprint coach.
And so how do you feel in just like a minute or two, how would you say that the erotic blueprint work has helped you to be able to work with people?
So you said a sentence or two?
A minute or two. A minute.
Okay, cool. So I was 11, 12, 13, 14. I was 5 or 6 years down my path of erotic awakening after my mom said if I had it to do over again, I'd be more open and adventurous sexually, and gave that permission to me so I could give it to myself. I was 5 or 6 years down the path and I had made great progress. I had become orgasmic, tapped into, my turn on and arousal, was allowing it, became the woman I used to hate. And I was still having issues of fulfilling sex acts of sex. So point in case, the first 5 to 6 years were so enlivening and awakening in my eroticism and eros outside of acts of sex. Like I was fulfilled because I was feeding my turn on and arousal in all these other ways. But the sex part was still lacking, even though I was orgasmic. I, overcame the anorgasmia. So the erotic blueprints shows you what turns you on and arouses you in 5 different categories. So society, SCARF, has taught us that women are sensual. They like roses and beautiful candlelight and nice music and romantic dinners and massages and lots of foreplay. And so SCARF has taught us that men are sexual. They like naked bodies, penetration, ejaculation, orgasm, wham bam, like let's get her done. And so if you aren't like that, you're a man and you're not like that, you identify female and you're not like this, then you could feel broken. And my personal story is I felt totally broken. Well, there's 3 other realms of turn on. One is energetic, which is more like the tantric way of like eye gazing and energy and not necessarily even touching each other or transferring energy between each other, space and anticipation and tease. And I'm talking way too fast to turn on and arouse and energetic until just then when I changed my speed. But now I'm talking more like a sexual. And then I can talk like a sensual would be turned on by. And we can also get into kinky, which can be, like classic BDSM, but kinky is so much bigger than that. And then there's shapeshifter that's turned on by all of them. So my introduction to the erotic blueprints, like 5 to 7 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm not broken. I was finally seen and accepted and given verbiage and framework for how my physical sexuality could be fulfilling. And that changed everything for me. And that's why I offer it to the world.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I've only interacted just a little bit, just now because Accelerated Evolution has become so connected with Erotic Blueprint. So I've interacted with it some, done the quiz, which anyone listening, you can go do an Erotic Blueprint quiz, which is really fun. Just interacting a little bit has really helped me as well for better understanding within myself. And so I've really appreciated that.
Yeah, and we're even talking in the community about another word we can use for it, because Erotic Blueprint limits it in most people's conditioned, scarf-riddled minds.
Just sex.
That erotic equals sex. And like I said, eroticism happens when we are like, oh, look at that sunset. Or we're like, oh, this food is so good. Or like, oh, do you hear this music? Oh, like all of that is eroticism. But anyway, we're talking about a different thing to call it so that we can be more inclusive to people's nervous systems that can't handle eroticism being anything more than sex until you work with me and I help you rewire that.
Love it. And then Accelerated Evolution, I know we just have a few minutes left. My son's over here yelling in the background.
I can't hear him.
How has the Accelerated Evolution work, how has that shifted or supported your ability to work with people?
So there would be times when I didn't know what to do with a client before Accelerated Evolution. Like I wasn't clear on like what the problem was, or I wasn't clear how to address or approach the issues or challenges that they were having. And Accelerated Evolution has given me such a great framework to ask things in a certain way to get to the objective and subjective problem. And then from there, I have like a menu of processes that I can choose from to dissolve the emotional charge that people are having around the challenge or issue. And then once that's out of the way, there's so much resolve and reconciliation they can have within themselves and find and be guided to their own answers. So I'm all about personal responsibility and empowerment. I'm not a coach that's going to hold your hand and tell you all of the things. I'm going to guide you and shine the light and ask questions for you to come to your own answers and your own knowing. And that's what I love about Accelerated Evolution is we dissolve the charge, and through that they're finding their own answers and knowing. And then once it's dissolved, like they're so much more resourceful because their turn on isn't mine. Their yes isn't mine. So who am I to know the answer for my clients? I want them to get used to and tapped into knowing their own answers and accessing them. And the dissolution of charge that Accelerated Evolution processes offer when facilitated gets them there. So it's like a win-win-win-win-win-win-win for the whole world.
So well said. Well, Monica Jayne, I'm thoroughly turned on after an hour of connecting with you.
Yay. And I want the listeners to notice what happened in their body when you said that to me, knowing you have a partner and a child, and you're saying that to me right now. It's like, that's all scarf, people. That's all scarf.
I know, and I guess I'm saying it without even thinking about it. So to anyone who feels that, it's like, there's nothing, there's no issue there. Right?
Yeah, there's no shame.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate your vulnerability, your presence, you just being such a clear channel of giving after, your journey, what you've been through and the way you give back to your clients, to people, taking the time to do this interview. I just really, really appreciate that. And I always love the chance to get to know you more.
Thank you.
How can people, if there's somebody who's really turned on or what you shared resonated with them during this interview, how could someone connect with you, get a hold of you, or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm hoping that the links can be in the description to the video because my name is spelled a little bit weird. So monicajayne.com, and it's MONICAJAYNE.com. There's a Y in Jayne. MonicaJayne.com has the whole menu. But what I would say is if you feel resonance with anything that I said and you're ready to get in touch with your nervous system, get in touch with your turn on and rewire yourself so that you don't have to live in shame and you can be unabashed. One-on-one coaching is my favorite thing to do. And so monicajayne.com/work-with-me is, that's not right. It's monicajayne.com/private coaching or something like that. Anyway, the Work With Me site will lead them there. And I have an application for anyone who wants to work together because I want to make sure we're a fit. And as Andrew mentioned, I am a certified erotic blueprint coach, and there are a ton of us. And I have about 20 that I have close relationships with that I can refer you out to if it doesn't feel like we are a match. I've got all kinds of intersectionalities of humans to match you up with, and I love doing that as well. And then there's lots of other things on the site, like the authentic evolution process is available in a DIY video format if you want to try to go it alone. But what I've noticed is when people realize when trying to do it all themselves ends and getting help begins is when they really, like when I really started to blossom. 14 years of struggling, reading all the books myself, and then finally getting help. It really changed when you have a human in front of you that's like holding space for you to get you where you want to go. And I'd be honored to do that for anyone who resonated with this today.
I would say the exact same for my journey as well. And obviously so many people that I know and so many people that I've worked with as well. So maybe you could just send me a message for the exact link that you'd like me to put in the description, and we'll do that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time today, Monica Jayne.
Thank you, Andrew. I love what you're up to. Thanks for sharing so much awesomeness with the world.
I love what you're up to. That's why I wanted to bring you on. And thank you so much for the way that you share and the way that you show up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching this interview. I hope you feel uplifted and inspired by what was shared. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel to make sure that you see all the other awesome videos that we have coming up.